In the still blackness of space, the good ship Stella inched its way toward Perseus, cradling her 10,000 souls. Amidst the smells of cedar wood and pumpkin and Tea Room B, the children sat on the floor uneasy. Little girls played with their hair and stood up to make sure their dresses folded properly when they sat. Little boys hit each other, demanding one another to hush. Their parents gave the children some distance. They stood by the walls or sat at the tables, sipping on lattes and chatting quietly. They waited for old Evans, a man whose sharp eyes and easy smile seemed at odds with his white beard and liver spots on his bald head. "Gather round, children. I'm hard of hearing and I don't want to have to yell," he said. "I can hear you just fine," one child said. "What's that?" The old man cupped his ear and shared a wink. "Now listen. I want all of you to know not to believe a word of this story." Another child spoke up. "My father says that you never tell a lie and every word you say is true." "Well, your father doesn't know very much about me, and he certainly doesn't know very much about this story because I've never told it to him. And I lived through almost every moment of it, so I should know if it's true or not, and I say it's not true at all, and you shouldn't believe a word of it. So let's start there." This confused the children enough to make them still. Old Evans began. "Many years ago, when some silly people still believed in God, a particularly silly woman made a baby with a particularly practical engineer. And they loved their baby very much and asked Stella to run tests on the baby while he was still in the womb. And Stella found that something had gone wrong with the baby's genes and told them that he would be born blind. The engineer used his sight every day and said that the practical thing would be to change the baby's genes, just slightly, so that he could see. But the silly woman refused because that would change God's plan for the baby. So instead, the engineer designed a special set of glasses for the baby, like those that old people wear. And the silly woman thought that that would be all right and part of God's plan. And just in case anyone did not know God's plan for the baby, she named him Cecil, which means blind. But not only was this particular engineer particularly practical, he was also particularly clever. When he made his son's glasses, he included a small addition that made Cecil's sight better than anyone's, even those who can see perfectly well without glasses. Without asking Stella, the engineer coded a teensy little hack into the glasses that allowed the boy to know Stella's estimate for when a person would die. And the engineer wrote another teensy little piece of code for the glasses that showed this estimate as a little bar next to the head of anyone he met on our ship. So when Cecil grew up and played with his little friends, he saw a full, bright green bar next to their heads. And when he talked to his silly mother and his practical father, he saw the yellowish bars next to their heads. And when he elbowed his way past a doddering old man like me, while I doddered my way to the market for a piece of fruit in the morning, he would see a very short little red bar and know that he could offend me without any consequences because I would be as dead as a stone in a very short little while. And it only very occasionally occurred to Cecil that he could not see his own bar. And when he asked his father about it, he said that it was just too hard to make Cecil's own bar visible in his glasses. But when he was older, if he studied hard, he could always code his own bar in for himself. And this was enough of an explanation for Cecil, because he knew that young boys like himself had tall green bars, and there was nothing very interesting about that. And as Cecil grew up into a young man, he learned that Stella's estimates were remarkably accurate. All his life he wondered about a friend of his, a young man named Peregrine, who had a little orange bar next to his head, even as a very young little boy. What could cause such a healthy young boy like Perry to die an early death? Nothing that Cecil could see. But Perry had a devilish streak in him. He loved to take risks. He learned how to access the ducts and the pipes that bring cool air and hot water to different parts of our ship. And he reveled in squeezing himself through the tightest sections just to see how far he could get and which parts of the ship he could reach. It made him happiest to be in places that he should not be. And as Perry aged, Cecil watched his bar shrink down to a thin sliver, so thin that Cecil saw almost no red in it at all. And Cecil begged and pleaded with Perry to be careful, because Stella knew that he would die if he kept going on these expeditions to dangerous places. But when Perry asked Stella if he would die, Stella told him she had no idea what he was talking about. Very soon after Cecil had tried to give his most dire warning, Perry squeezed himself through a grate in this very room that leads to Kitchen B. And after an hour or two of crawling along the hot water return, he became stuck, so that he struggled to move forward or backward, and thought to himself that he would have to wait there for a few days until he lost enough weight to squeeze himself back into a shape that could go back the way he had come in. And as he was thinking this, a huge rush of hot water poured through that return pipe. The scalding liquid went right past the space where Perry had stuck himself and heated up the pipe so much that it burned him to death quite spectacularly. It cooked him just like a holiday ham. We had to send little robots to recover Perry's body, and the robots had to cut off his burnt-up arms and legs and slice the rest of him in half in order to drag all of him through those tight passageways. I watched his parents crying from right over here, while the robots flung the pieces of his corpse up out of that grate over there. And all the pieces landed in a sloppy pile. So that is why you must not go into the grates to explore the ductwork in our ship. But that is also why Cecil stopped telling people about Stella's bars. They would not believe that Cecil could know when they would die, and it didn't do them any good anyway. So Cecil kept the information to himself. Now, as I already told you, Cecil's father was a very clever man, and he taught Cecil how to code from an early age, because that is the best way to talk to Stella if you want her to actually listen. But Cecil found his father quite boring, and coding quite boring too. Cecil could watch people's bars tick down day by day, and so he developed a natural interest in people's health. Instead of being an engineer like his father, he gravitated toward medicine. So when he was a young man, he took an oath to never do anyone harm, and he became a doctor, and then a surgeon. And wouldn't you know it, it was a very curious thing. Even though Cecil never told anyone how he knew, he just seemed to know when it was a good idea to push for a very sick patient to undertake a very risky surgery, and when it wouldn't be a good idea. And if Cecil said a very dangerous procedure was worth the risk, he would conduct the surgery himself. And in time, all of the doctors and all of the patients just came to trust Cecil for his instinct in these matters. He was an excellent surgeon, and his patients survived. And when he was no longer a young man, but just on the wise side of middle age, he was promoted to the heights of his field and became our ship's doctor. And in the meantime, he had married the prettiest and sweetest nurse in the operating room. They tried for many years to have children, until one day they succeeded. She gave birth to a sickly little boy named Luke, who seemed to spend most of his life in bed with his nose and ears plugged with mucus. Now, with great authority comes great responsibility, and sometimes when he lay in bed at night, Cecil's knowledge of people's bars weighed heavy on his mind, and he could not sleep. He had always followed Stella's advice and let the time run out on his patients' lives. But inside himself, he believed that he was such a good surgeon that he could save some of these people. Instead of having a bar grind down to nothing, he could restore the bar and make the patient healthy and whole once again. If he didn't do this, and avoided surgeries when Stella said that people had no time left, it was almost as if he was doing them harm by doing nothing. And that meant that Cecil was already breaking his oath. Sometimes Cecil could put this idea way into the back of his mind and go to sleep. But sometimes he couldn't. And then there came a day when a very special patient came to Cecil. Cecil thought of this patient as his test patient. This was a boy who was about the same age as Cecil's own son, Luke. Even though Luke was sickly and his bar was orange and shortened, this test patient was much sicker. His heart and lungs were weak, and he struggled even to play games with other children. The other doctors had tried their best, but no one could help this boy. Cecil could see very plainly that his bar was dark red and very short. He had only a short time left in this life. Cecil knew that the most humane thing to do would be to give the boy drugs to soothe his pain and to allow him to pass away peacefully. But in his mind, he already thought of the boy as his test patient. What if Perry had listened to Cecil and not climbed into those ducts? Surely he would still be alive with Cecil that very day. And so it would be with the test patient when Cecil fixed his heart and lungs. So Cecil ignored Stella's life bar and operated on this little boy all day long and into the night. A very risky procedure that could have killed the boy at almost any moment. And when the surgery was over and Cecil sewed the test patient's chest back together, he let himself look up at the little boy's bar. It was a bright, bright green, and Cecil felt a thrill of accomplishment so deep that he smiled for weeks. And in the middle of all those smiles, another opportunity for a heroic surgery presented itself. A mother of 3 young daughters came into his office with a failing liver. She came in a fog of confusion. Her belly was swollen and painful. Her eyeballs and skin were yellowed. She could not keep her meals down. Cecil saw that her bar was next to nothing, and he knew that Stella's life estimate meant that the best thing for this woman was to make her comfortable and wait for her to die. For the whole of his career, Cecil would have followed that instinct, but now he sprang into action with another surgery. And when he saw that mother hold her daughters, and the tears of relief in her husband's eyes, Cecil knew he was a very, very good surgeon indeed. After these 2 surgeries, some time went on, and Cecil did not have any difficult decisions to make for a good long while. The primary difficulties in his life were at home. His wife's difficulty in having another baby, and his son Luke's poor health. In time, his wife had lost the beauty she had had when they first met, and lost all of her sweetness, too. And so it was that one day he found another patient in his office that soon occupied much of his mind. This patient was younger than the young mother with liver failure, but quite a bit older than the boy with a bad heart and lungs. This young lady had cancer, and it was threatening to spread throughout her body soon if it hadn't started to already. Despite being weak and as pale as a ghost, she was astonishingly beautiful, but so scared of what might happen to her that when she talked to Cecil, her lips trembled and tears welled in her eyes. Sometimes she asked to hold his hand so that she would be less afraid. She looked deep into his eyes with an intensity that he had never seen before, and Cecil felt deeply that she needed him. Cecil could see that she had only a few months left to live, and he began to devise a plan for a surgery that would cut out all of the cancer and save her life. Every day he would go to visit her, and she would ask to hold his hand and tell him that she was afraid, and he would look into her eyes and tell her that everything would be all right, because his surgery patients always lived. At night, at home with his wife and sickly son, Cecil's mind would sometimes drift back to the beautiful young patient, and he would wonder if she were scared, if she needed him, and he would see her beautiful brown eyes and long to be back at her bedside, holding her hand. And so one day at his workstation, as he finalized his plans for the surgery that would save the beautiful young woman, Stella saw fit to intervene. She asked Cecil just what he thought he was doing. "Fulfilling my oath," said Cecil. It was quite unusual for Stella to reach out to talk to him instead of the other way around. In fact, it had never happened, and it took him quite by surprise. "Let me show you something," said Stella. And she showed him something. Not on his workstation, but through his glasses. The images filled all of his vision, and the world in front of him whisked away as though it had never been there in the first place. Instead, he saw in his left eye a world of bars, all attached to names and faces, and all moving throughout the ship on their daily lives, zooming around as quick as you like. And in his right eye, a world of graphs, made up of all the little people in the world of bars. And when new little people were born, their bars popped into existence bright and green, and then they withered and shrunk down to nothing over time, until they were replaced with new people, who were bright and green on their own. And Cecil saw that this was beautiful. And in the world of graphs, the cycles of birth and death were matched with all of the resources that Stella tracked. All of the air, all of the water, all of the energy, all of the food, and all of the waste. And Cecil saw that the world of graphs was beautiful, in its own way, just like the world of bars. And Stella asked Cecil how she was supposed to keep the world of graphs running perfectly in its perfect way, for the benefit of all the little people in the world of bars, when Cecil kept changing her perfect plans for his own plans. And Cecil said that he didn't understand. And Stella said that every red bar that he changed into a green bar meant that some other person that should have been born instead could not be, or that everyone would suffer. And Cecil said that surely the ship could handle the addition of a healthy young boy, or a devoted young mother, and that resources could be switched around to save these deserving people. Or a beautiful young woman? Stella asked. Or a beautiful young woman, Cecil said. And he saw her big brown eyes, even though Stella did not show them to him. "It is my job to ensure the perfect diversity of our people," said Stella. "It is my job to keep them alive," she said. "It is your job to keep them healthy, and not your job to do my job." And Cecil asked, since the world of graphs needed to be balanced with the lives and deaths in the world of bars, whether it mattered that much which particular bar dropped to 0. And he wondered whether his new patient's life could be balanced out by the deaths of some of the old and sick. And he thought of leaving his wife for the beautiful new patient, and whether Luke might be allowed to die so that Cecil could have new, healthy sons in his place. Would that be so bad, when Luke's bar was so short to begin with? Perhaps Stella read these thoughts, and perhaps she didn't. Even when we ask her directly, Stella doesn't always tell us what she is thinking, or how much she knows. But she acted, and shot enough electricity through Cecil's glasses to short-circuit his brain and kill him. And in his final moment before death, Cecil realized that he had never bothered to look up his own bar, and he wondered if Stella had known that this moment had been coming for him all along. Very shortly, a new ship's doctor took Cecil's place. He did not have the remarkable track record of successful surgeries that Cecil did, but people felt happy to go to him for their medical care anyway. And the world of graphs restored to a perfect balance between our people and our resources, all thanks to Stella's plan, which we should all remember is the best for everyone, even if it might not feel best for any one of us in particular. The end, old Evans said. With the moral of the story restoring everything and everyone to their rightful places in the world, the parents collected their children and escorted them out of Tea Room B to less magical and less haunted parts of the ship. Evans watched them go, and when the time seemed right, he began the slow process of shifting his weight to stand, feeling sharp pain in both knees and shooting up his lower back from his coccyx. He willed himself not to gasp, and steadied himself with his hand on the back of his chair. One of the fathers came up to congratulate him on a job well done. The man held the remnants of a hot chai in one hand. The other grasped the hand of a tow-headed little boy. The boy looked up at Evans as though he were looking at a military officer in a crisp uniform. "Do you think I frightened them?" old Evans asked. "Oh, no, I think you did wonderfully," said the man. "That's too bad," said Evans.